Honest conversations with interesting people. Hi, I'm Mike from the Genuine Chit Chat podcast, and I talk to a wide variety of guests across an eclectic range of interesting topics. People I've spoken to include a magister from the Church of Satan, a blind Australian filmmaker, a puppeteer from Labyrinth and Dark Crystal, and I also speak to musicians of all kinds of genres, authors, actors, podcasters. Really, there is no limit to who I speak to, and the subject matter is endless. So if you believe in the art of conversation and want to hear different people talking about their passions, then this is the perfect show for you. You can find Genuine Chit Chat anywhere you listen to podcasts, and there's some video versions on YouTube, so there's no reason not to tune in. Find other great podcasts like this one at podmoth.network.
You didn't do the hey, what's up, you guys? You didn't do the gasp for air.
Hey, what's up, you guys? I'm Kathryn.
And I'm Hayley.
And we are Saturdays Are for the Ghouls,
a Podmoth podcast.
Welcome to our podcast. It's True Crime Week, everybody. How are you doing, Hayley?
I'm doing good. Just, stressing, but that's life. It's
stressing.
Chilling out, maxing, relaxing, all cool and all. Shooting some people outside of the school.
Outside of school, yeah.
Yeah.
And a couple of guys, they were just
up to no good.
Started getting in trouble in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
I got in one little fight and my mom got scared.
Instead of send me to fucking Bel Air.
Right. Anyway, we just do the whole song. That's our whole podcast.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, goodbye. Good night.
Good night. Okay.
What if that was like our new shtick? Is just seeing how many like fucking
lyrics we can
put it like just or say
just in a sentence.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'd be good at that game. I like that game.
I'm okay.
You're okay.
I just feel really bad because I can clearly tell that what you're about to tell me is very distraught, has brought you a lot of grief, and it worries me, and I'm just like, I'll read it if you want me to.
You won't be able to make sense of my notes.
That's very true.
Even if
I'll just read it and be like, this isn't bad.
Some of it's up in my head. So, yeah, Hayley, okay. In the last few horror movie weeks, I have had some sort of say in the movie, like when we did Stay Alive. Mm-hmm. I really requested that because it was one of my favorites. So I mentioned to her, I said, hey, is there anything that you like totally want to see from me? Because, as a true crime person, I feel like there are different types of true crimers. True crimers. There's people like me who enjoy and I'm not saying that Hayley doesn't, but I enjoy like the survival stories and like the, came from the bottom and now we're here, like those kinds of stories. Like I've given you a bunch of those, and
I'm fucked up. I'm sorry.
It's not that Hayley likes more gruesome stories. It's just that she's not fazed by a lot of things. And so she said, I asked her if there was something that she wanted, and she said something along the lines like she wanted something like heavier than what I normally do. And so I went out searching.
I'm sorry.
And it's on it was shocking at the things that have happened in this true crime.
She's avoiding talking about it. I feel so bad. I'm so sorry.
Don't feel bad. It's fine. I'm okay with talking about it. But before I talk about it, I just want to give you all like the biggest trigger warning. And
you are so visibly uncomfortable talking
I just
about
don't want anyone to feel like I've duped them into like this true crime's not going to be that bad. It's going to be like a heist, or it's going to be like something lighthearted.
I can tell you right now, it's going to be bad. Very bold, underlined, highlight that bitch, trigger warning. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll say it probably a few more times
I'll
before we
say it-
actually
I'll
start
say
the
it-
story.
Yes, I'll say it during the story before I get to anything too graphic.
You just like are talking, and then all of a sudden it's like a robotic voice. Trigger warning.
Yeah, so I don't want anyone to feel like I've tried to dupe them into thinking that this is a safe true crime podcast that they can listen to like willy-nilly, especially if they're not like a true crimer. You know, I feel like my true crime stories are like palatable to most people, you know, like
Yeah.
like I apply to the masses. You know, the stories that you lean towards are generally in like a darker sense, so I'm gonna leave it at that.
What I'm saying, so you should have, when we were talking about what we should name it, when you were like, what should I name it? Just name it Trigger Warning. Like, that's the title. Be like, it's that bad. It needs to be in the fucking title. Change our whole podcast name to Trigger Warning for this one episode.
So you guys have made it X amount of time into the podcast. We enjoy you. We'll be talking and chit-chatting for a little bit, and then I'll tell you when we're getting into the story. If you guys want to skip it, it's okay.
They just skipped the whole episode to our banter.
Yeah, just
at the end.
I don't think anyone tunes in just for us bantering.
I don't know.
I've read a lot of reviews on a lot of different true crime podcasts that are like, I wish they would just shut up and get to the true crime.
Oh, on other podcasts?
Other podcasts.
Oh, okay.
Not on ours, obviously. Please don't leave those reviews on our podcast.
All of a sudden, cue the hate comments.
But if you do like us, definitely give us a 5-star review and leave us something nice in a note.
Shameless plug. Yeah, there you go. That's how you do it.
Speaking of reviews, give us a nice one and it'll make our day a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll maybe make this whole story a little bit worth it.
I was like, especially Kathryn, who is visibly uncomfortable talking about this story.
I think it was like the extent of research that I was doing that really put me in the spiral of like,
did you go down like a dark or deep hole?
I mean, like, it's just everything on top of each other, and you'll find out what I mean by that.
Okay.
As we get into the story, but I think it's just like, if one of these things happened to someone, it would be awful. And so everything that happened to this person, you know, it makes it like that much more insane. And so
you got this. I believe in you.
Okay. She's really trying to cheer me on because I'm so visibly she's like not used to me being like anxious like this, like visibly. But yeah, so we're gonna get into it. And this is the story of Gertrude Benswisky. Now, I'm going to just give you this one right here, right in front. She's the bad guy. So let's, as I tell you her like life story, don't feel sad for her.
Gertrude.
She's the bad guy.
Gertrude.
So, yeah, her name's Gertrude. Like, obviously, she's the bad guy. Okay.
Like Hans Gruber.
Right. She was born in Indiana in 1928, and she was the third of 6 children.
Right in the middle.
Yep.
Right in the middle.
And on October 5th of 1939, at 11 years old, she saw her father die of a heart attack suddenly. And then 5 years later, she dropped out of high school at 16. And she married a 18-year-old named John. And with him, she had 4 children, and she was married to him for 10 years. But he was really an angry person, and he had a very hot temper, and so he was very abusive towards her. So that happened for 10 years of her marriage until she left, but she was able to keep custody of her kids. After she divorced John, she married Edward Guthrie, but that marriage only lasted 3 months.
Oh.
Supposedly, the marriage ended because he was tired of her children, because she had 4 kids.
Damn.
I don't know. Anyway, I don't know exactly. He wasn't a very big part of her life, obviously. He only lasted 3 months. So
he's a blip in the timeline.
Seriously. So she, at that point, remarried John. who was abusive to her still,
Yeah.
and had 2 more kids. So at
Oh,
this
God.
point, she had 6 kids.
Get off her. I'm sorry.
Do you know what's causing that? I'm just kidding. Because I have a feeling you don't.
They're just like, we spend one night together every so often, and
every
every
just
time you just pop out a fucking alien baby. Like, he just accuses her of cheating.
That's not my kid. He looks like an alien.
I mean,
They
babies
all
do
look like
weird
an alien when they come out.
Babies look weird when they come out. Eyes are all big.
Gertrude at this point has 6 of them. And then she divorces John for the second time. Shocker, that marriage doesn't work out twice.
Yeah.
You didn't think that maybe the first time around.
Man, she got 2 more kids out of that shit.
So in 1963, just a few weeks after she got divorced, she began a relationship with a 22-year-old named Dennis Lee Wright at 35 years old.
Mm.
So Dennis Lee Wright was also bad-tempered and abused her as well. They had 1 son together, Dennis Jr. And then as soon as she gave birth, he peaced out. He was out.
Peace out, Girl Scout.
He never contributed to his care at all. Nothing. So in this plethora of relationships that she had, what?
I was just like, oh God.
Yeah.
1, I hate people that name their kids after themselves.
Yes.
I'm like, really? So Dennis Jr.?
Yeah.
Like, really?
Also, like, imagine naming your kid after his father and his father just deuces.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Like, Skadoodles Noodles.
And then, so now you have to say his name. Like, that's his name.
Yeah. So, throughout these relationships, she now has
7 kids?
7 kids. And she has miscarried also 6 other children.
Oh my God.
So, she has been pregnant 13 times.
That's crazy.
That is bonkers.
That's at least 13 years of pregnancy.
Seriously, like she's like pregnant every year, probably. So in 1965, she was alone with 7 kids.
I was about to say, is there a year that this woman's not alone?
1965 and further.
Or that she is alone?
1965 and up. She never got back together with anyone else after Dennis. So she has 7 kids. They are named Paula, and she's 17, Stephanie, 15, John Jr., 12, Marie, 11, Shirley, 10, James, 8, and Dennis, 1.
Bruh, she has 2 kids named after her ex-husbands. That must suck.
The first boy, it was very common back then, though. The first boy of every family would generally be named after the father.
I guess.
Here we are, 1965. Gertrude has a bunch of kids. And she, like, if you looked at her, like, she looked, normal? I would say, like, she looked like she was close to death. Oh. She was, like, very tiny. She was 5'6" and 100 pounds. She supported herself.
Cane. Sorry. I'm sorry.
She supported herself by doing odd jobs, babysitting, doing people's laundry, but her lack of money was growing into big, rapid problems, like in her home. And then Paula, at 17 years old, is pregnant.
Oh my God.
And not only is she pregnant, but she's pregnant with a middle-aged married man's child. So she was the side chick to some guy, and she got pregnant. So
great.
Gertrude's health was steadily declining. She looked very haggard looking. People say that she had like a skeletal appearance because she was so skinny. Mm-hmm. Her eyes were sunken in, and she began calling herself Mrs. Wright because Dennis Lee Wright, she was telling people that Dennis and her got married before he left. And so she was calling herself Mrs. Wright. we're in 1965, and Paula's pregnant, but she's like in the very beginning stages of birth, right? So Paula and her friend Darlene met two new girls at school, Sylvia Likens and Jenny Likens, which was her sister. Jenny had polio and walked with leg braces. Sylvia was 16 and Jenny was 15. So they all went home after school and they went to Paula's house to like drink soda and like listen to records and like hang out. It was the 60s, like just like teen things.
Like, girl things.
Yes. The Likens sisters told Paula and Darlene that their mom, Betty, was currently in jail because because she was shoplifting. She was caught shoplifting. And that Betty was a single mom, but not really single. Like, she left her husband, but they weren't divorced. But she was taking care of the girls by herself at that time. So Sylvia was left to take care of Jenny on her own at that point. So Paula offered to let them stay the night that night. And so she took them up on that. And they stayed the night that night, and they were going to go home the next day. Apparently, their father, Lester, was trying to track them down, though, because, of course, Betty was in jail. And so he was like, I got to take care of my girls. Like, they're somewhere here. So he was going through town asking, like, have you seen my daughters? They look like this. Da, 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 da. Just so happens he asked Darlene. Darlene was like, they're at Paula's house. So if you just go over there, that's where they are. So he went to Paula's house, and Gertrude comes out and talks to him outside the house. And somehow there's not like no one knows, because only Gertrude and Lester knows like what happened in that conversation. But somehow they agreed to let the girls live there for $20 a week. Lester would send $20 and the girls could stay there. And so Lester didn't have to deal with that at that time, which I'm not really sure what Lester would have done. Like, why would the girl, they're almost 18, like they're 15 and 16. Like they aren't that big of a problem to like handle as like teenagers. If they were younger kids, I would understand needing to have someone watch them, but like they're teenagers and they, could potentially be fine on their own. So I just didn't understand how that all came about. But she agreed to watch them for $20 a week. That would definitely help out Gertrude, and they would have a place to stay.
Sounds like a good deal.
Sounds like a great deal. Except for Lester never went inside the house to like check it out. Never went inside to talk to the girls. Never went inside to just like see like the place where his daughters would be staying.
Right.
Just to check it out, make sure that everything was like up to par. I just wrote, he should have ... Gertrude had no stove, no microwave, so they couldn't cook a hot meal at all in this house. There was only enough beds for half the people that lived in that house, because, mind you, there were 7 kids plus Sylvia and Jenny. That's 9 kids and Gertrude. So that's 5 beds for 10 people. Not enough. And I'm not sure if they counted baby Dennis as a person, so maybe there was even less beds. And all of the surfaces were caked in a thick layer of dirt. I mean, it has to have not been cleaned for a long time to be caked with dirt.
Yeah.
And then the only food in the house was some bread and crackers in the pantry. And there were only 3 sets of plates and utensils. So only 3 people could eat at one time. But they didn't have to worry about that because there was no food anyway. So.
I know, right?
So there's basically nothing in this house except for 10 people. Just 10 people hanging out. So at first all was well. Like the first week went smashing. They went to school with Paula. They did some extracurriculars and they went to church on Sunday with everyone. But that first payment of $20 never came to the house. And that set Gertrude off. And That's where the bad stuff starts. So she started throwing a tantrum and she pitched a big fit and she was yelling at the girl saying, I took care of you two bitches for nothing. I mean, like, maybe it was like lost in the mail. Like, maybe it was like, I don't know. I don't know what happened. Regardless, she didn't get the money and she didn't even wait to throw a fit. Like, I would have at least waited a couple days to see if maybe something came. But no, she went straight off on them. So there's a trigger warning of like abuse right now. Okay. So she forced them to pull down their skirts and their underwear and lay across the bed as she hit them.
Yeah.
So in the next few days, though, Lester and Betty came to check on the girls. Sylvia and Jenny did not tell their parents about anything that just had happened. And I was surprised, but we don't know what Gertrude was telling them. You know, like, if you tell your parents, like, this will happen, and like, she was probably gaslighting the shit out of them. It was surprising to me that they didn't tell them because they hadn't been there that long. But I mean, that kind of stuff can happen quickly, you know. So they still didn't go inside though. They just like hung out outside. Later that week, the two sisters were out collecting Coke bottles and selling them for money so they could get money for candy. And so when Gertrude saw the candy when they came home, she accused them of stealing. Sylvia explained themselves to her, and she called her a liar and bent her over the bed and beat her there again.
Mm-hmm.
Shortly after, Gertrude's kids told their mom that they were disgusted with how much Sylvia eats. And like, I'm surprised, like, there's even disgusted with how much, because there's probably not that much anyway.
She eats 2 slices of bread.
Yeah. So she confronted Sylvia. I guess if you have any problems with eating, there's another trigger warning here. So she forced her to eat hot dogs that were piled high with like stuff on top of it. And like they forced her to eat it, and then she vomited, and then they made her to scoop her vomit up and eat the rest of the vomit.
Ew.
Gross. So after a few days, the Likens came to check on the girls, and Sylvia still didn't tell them anything. In August of 1965, Sylvia was telling some of the other girls in the house that she had let a boy feel her up. Quotes, feel her up. Gertrude overheard this and began yelling again. She called her a prostitute at this point, and she said that she told all of the people in the house that Sylvia was pregnant because, quote, she let a boy touch her vagina. And I'm like, that is sometimes how it works, but there are specific things that have to touch together for that to work. And you know who knows about that? Paula knows about that.
Oh yeah, because
she's fucking pregnant. Yeah, but we'll get to that. So when she was yelling at Sylvia, she proceeded to like push her down and started kicking her between the legs repeatedly. After that incident, she tried sitting down in a chair, and Paula pushed her out of the chair saying, and I quote, "You ain't fit to sit in people chairs." And so they made her stand or sit on the ground. She wasn't allowed to sit in any chairs anymore at the house, which like psychologically is like so fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're not people enough to sit in a chair. So from that point on, she would have had to ask permission to sit in any chair in the house. So Gertrude let her children use Sylvia for basically whatever they want, and these games ranged from beating her, throwing her down the stairs, or using her as like a life-size plaything. The day after this, the Likens sisters started spreading rumors about Paula and Stephanie, the two oldest girls, saying that they were having sex with boys. Now, I don't know. I know it's not a rumor for Paula, and Stephanie does have a boyfriend. So I'm going to bet you that it was something that they told them, and they were just telling people so that it would get off of them and go on to Paula and Stephanie.
Right.
But anyway, Stephanie's boyfriend, Coy Hubbard, 15 years old, heard what they were saying and came over to the house and beat up Sylvia. Then Gertrude, finding out what happened, encouraged him to come over anytime he wanted to practice his judo with Sylvia.
Wow.
Around the same time, Gertrude got Sylvia's best friend, Anna, alone and convinced her that Sylvia called her mom a whore and convinced her to violently attack Sylvia when she came back into the room. And she did. She convinced Paula's friend that Sylvia was spreading rumors about her mother, and she made them fight. And at this point, she told Jenny to go hit Sylvia too. And Jenny refused at first, but then Gertrude hit her and said, if you don't hit her, like, I'm gonna beat you up. And so she did. And that kind of shit dragged on forever. Now, new neighbors moved in next door, and are we not hoping that maybe they would?
They won't, but I hope so.
Maybe they would be our saviors here. So,
your face was why you're like,
Phyllis and Raymond Vermillion, they saw all the kids over at their house, and Phyllis thought Gertrude might be a good person to babysit her boys because she had so many kids over there. She obviously could watch 2 more.
She's obviously great with kids.
Obviously great with kids. She has fucking 10 at her house. She doesn't need 2 more. Jeez. Anyway, so they invited all of them over to their house to at least vet them here, which was good. She invited them all over for a barbecue to get to know each other. Phyllis noticed that Sylvia was wandering around and had a black eye. And Paula bragged that she gave it to Sylvia.
Mm-hmm.
And then she had a mug of like steaming water and went over to Sylvia and threw it in her face right in front of Phyllis. Phyllis never reported that. A couple weeks later, I think, Phyllis went over to borrow something from them, and she noticed that Sylvia was wandering around with a swollen lip and a black eye that was like swollen shut. And Paula began to demonstrate how she gave her that black eye, and she took her belt off and she started beating Sylvia again. And I'm like, you straight up see it, and Paula's telling you that she's doing it, and you're not.
You gotta report it.
Not reporting it. So another day, Sylvia came home and she said that she needed a sweatsuit for gym class. Gertrude said that they couldn't afford that, and so she stole one from school. When Gertrude found out, she asked why, and Sylvia confessed that she did steal it. And so somehow, Gertrude moved from the stealing to Sylvia being a prostitute again, and threw her down on the ground and kicked her in the crotch again repeatedly.
Mm-hmm.
And then Gertrude said, quote, to cure your sticky fingers, or she burned her tips of her fingers with a cigarette. And at that point, she gave everyone in the house permission to put their cigarettes out on Sylvia anytime. Another day, the Likens sisters sold soda bottles again, and upon returning, she accused Sylvia, because she had money, of being a prostitute again. Do another trigger warning for bad things. So she made her strip down in front of her sons and the neighbor boys. And then she gave her a Coke bottle and made her masturbate with it. After this incident, she became incontinent. So Gertrude decided that she wasn't, quote, fit to live with people anymore and put her in the basement. Yep. So she lived in the basement, and the basement didn't have a bathroom. So she would have to go to the bathroom just on the ground down there. After finding out that she goes to the bathroom down there on the floor, which she had no other options. So, like, it's not like she had to.
Yeah.
Gertrude started a specific bathing regimen for Sylvia. And this bathing regimen was that she'd fill the tub with scalding water, tie her ankles and her feet together, and dunk her into the scalding water as many times as she wanted. And this would happen either every day or it wouldn't happen for a couple days. It was never like on a schedule.
Mm-hmm.
It was just whenever she felt like it, she did it. And so she pretty much stayed naked down in the basement all the time. Gertrude turned her into a money-making opportunity and charging the neighbor kids 5 cents to see her naked and gawk at her. So we're here at the point where there might have been some rescues. So Jenny, her sister that knows everything that's happening in this house to her sister.
And nothing happened to Jenny?
The only time that something happened was that when she refused to hit her sister. They hit her once, but then she
Mhm.
started hitting her sister. Jenny wrote a letter to her older sister, Diana. Diana was older and like married and had kids. So she lived away from the town. And she explained everything that was happening to Sylvia to Diana. And Diana thought that she was just complaining about punishments, that it wasn't as serious as she was explaining it. And she was like embellishing because she thought it was just like the punishment she was going to get. And so she didn't come and she didn't try to help in all when she got that letter. Judy Duke, who was a neighbor kid, she saw Sylvia and told her mom. And her mom said, that's what you get when you do things wrong or when you're being punished. And like, imagine Judy like going and seeing Sylvia and thinking that's really what punishment was, when her mom thinks that maybe it was just like time out.
Yeah.
You know, like, I don't know exactly what she said to her mother, and I don't know exactly what Jenny said to Diana, but like, I don't know how, like, if someone told me that someone was, you know, tied up naked in a basement, like, I wouldn't think that was just punishment. You know, like that would be more alarming to me. And then Reverend Roy Julian visited the home, and Gertrude complained about Sylvia being a prostitute, except for, again, Paula was pregnant. But Gertrude kept denying the fact that she was pregnant and still said that Paula was pure and was still a virgin, although she was very much so pregnant. So they prayed for her salvation, and Reverend Roy Julian returned to check on them, and Paula confessed to him that she had hatred in her heart for Sylvia, and Gertrude said, that's not true. No, she doesn't. And then, like, he left. Although Diana did not answer the letter or come right away when Jenny wrote, she did come to visit her sisters. But Gertrude wouldn't allow her, and Gertrude said that Lester told her that Diana wasn't allowed to come and see him. And when she questioned it, she said, I'm going to call the police if you don't get off my property. So she like went off the property and waited until she saw Jenny leave the house. She approached her, and Jenny said that she wasn't allowed to talk to her and ran away. So, although they may not have done anything physical to Jenny, they definitely like psychologically gaslit Jenny for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Because she ran away from her sister, who she wrote to just a few weeks ago for help. So, at that point, Diana called social services, and a social worker came to visit, and Gertrude said that Sylvia was kicked out because she was dirty, and she ran away. On October 21st, Gertrude made the kids bring Sylvia upstairs, and they tied her to one of the beds. And she said, if you can sleep here on this bed without wetting the bed, you can start sleeping upstairs. But she couldn't. She couldn't make it through the night without wetting the bed. And so at this point, she was forced to strip again and masturbate again with the bottle in front of her sons and the neighbor boys. After she got dressed, Gertrude brought back up the lies that she supposedly told about Paula and Stephanie, and she said, you branded my daughters, now I'm going to brand you.
Mm-hmm.
So they forced her to strip down again, and they tied her down and gagged her, and with a sewing needle and a lighter, they carved into her stomach, I'm a prostitute and proud of it. It was like a 3rd-degree burns and a tattoo, but there was no ink. So Gertrude left the room, and the kids decided, let's tattoo an S on her chest for Sylvia or slave. And so one of them tattooed the bottom part of the S, and then they made Jenny do the top part. But they somehow it got mixed up and it looked like a 3. So after that, they took her down to the basement and Coy practiced judo on her into the middle of the night. So like probably for hours.
Mm.
Jenny snuck down and visited with her sister after he had left. And she said to her, she said, "I'm going to die, I can tell." Now, I don't know where the change of heart came from, or if their conscience was catching up with them, if Jenny came up and told them, or what. But shortly after, Gertrude allowed Sylvia to come upstairs and sleep in a bed for the night. So she was slept until noon, until she was woken up. And they bathed her in a nice, warm, soapy bath. Like, all of a sudden, they were being like, nice. Like when they didn't give a shit about her fucking 5 hours ago.
Mm.
So after the bath, they made her write a letter. And I'm going to read the letter that she made her write. So this is how they made her write it. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Likens," which why wouldn't she write it Mom and Dad? "I went with a gang of boys in the middle of the night, and they said that they would pay me to give them something, so I got in the car, and they all got what they wanted. And when they finished, they beat me up and left sores on my face and all over my body. They also put on my stomach, 'I'm a prostitute and proud of it.' I have done just about everything I could do to make Gertie mad and cause Gertie more money than she's got. I've torn up a new mattress, peed on it, and I've also cost Gertie doctor bills that she really can't pay and made Gertie a nervous wreck and all her kids." And then she was informed not to sign it. Doesn't even seem like a full letter. Like, we can just assume that Gertrude was not all fucking there. So after that, they were making a plan to dump her in at a garbage dump and leave her to die. And she overheard them talking about this, and she saw the door and she tried to run out that door. But because she was so beat up and like broken, she was going so slow that Gertrude was able to drag her back into the house. So unfortunately that didn't work, but she at least attempted, which at that point they sat her down at the table and they attempted to feed her toast, but she was unable to swallow it. Like, she wasn't able to eat the toast. So they took her in the basement and repeatedly punched her in the stomach. The next day, they attempted to bludgeon her. And like, I thought this was really like chef's kiss part of this. Gertie took a chair and tried to hit her, and she missed completely, shattering the chair apart. So then she took the like stick that was in her hand and tried to hit her and missed again, but somehow hit herself in the eye and gave herself a black eye. Like, I was like, just desserts. Like, that's exactly, I mean, like, not only what you deserve, but at least it's a start. Coy, who practiced judo on her, stepped in and beat her with a broomstick at that point, because obviously Gertie couldn't do it. So over that night, she was banging an iron shovel on the ground, and supposedly the neighbors heard it and still did nothing. Fucking, what's the point in having neighbors if they're not going to like help you in an emergency?
Right.
I might as well live by myself, like out in the middle of bumfuck nowhere. Jeez. On 10/26, they brought her upstairs to take a bath, and they found out she was not breathing. Stephanie tried CPR, but she was already dead. So they took her back down to the basement. They called the police. They gave them the letter that she wrote and said that she ran away. But secretly, Jenny pulled aside one of the officers and said, "If you can get me out of here, I can tell you everything." That triggered them to search the house. and they found her body down in the basement. So they took her body and they arrested Gertrude, Paula, Stephanie, John Jr., Hobbs, who was her personal assistant, and I'll talk to you about him in just a second, and Coy, for murder. They also arrested all of the neighborhood kids that were at her house at that time as well. They charged them with injury to a person. Let's talk about Hobbs for a second. Hobbs was like a 15-year-old that she charged to be like her personal assistant. So basically, he did anything that she needed, especially in regards to Sylvia. And there were rumors that her and him were together. Her and a 15-year-old were together. And she was probably almost 40 at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But there was nothing like specific about that. And I don't know if that's true, but he was arrested for murder as well. Her autopsy showed that she had over 100 cigarette burns. She had second and third degree burns, severe bruising, muscle and nerve damage. And Sylvia nearly severed her lips by biting on them, like because she was in pain. And her vagina was swollen shut, and the cause of death was brain swelling, hemorrhaging, and shock.
Mm-hmm.
The trial began May of 1966. They were held with no bail. The neighbor kids who were at the house were dismissed. Their charges were dismissed and dropped, and they were able to go home. And Stephanie somehow, her and her lawyer got them to try her separately instead of with everyone else, and her charges were dropped as well. But Gertrude, Paula, John, Hobbs, and Coy, they all were tried at the same time. So they were seeking the death penalty for all of them. Paula's trial got cut short because she went into labor and had a child. She had a little girl and named her Gertrude.
Oh my god.
That was awful. Gertrude's lawyer blamed the kids for everything that happened to Sylvia, and saying that Gertrude was not capable of this abuse because of, how she looked. And the kids' lawyers did the same for Gertrude. It's like, obviously this was Gertrude. Obviously it wasn't the kids. When really it was a joint affair.
Right. Well, like it was both of them.
During the trial, there was the biggest damaging testimony. Gertrude actually self-incriminated herself a lot while she was on the stand, because I'm sure she couldn't keep her shit together. She's fucking psycho.
Yeah.
She said Sylvia was a prostitute, started fights, and Marie, her daughter, who when we first began this journey was about 11, she was confirming all of the story that her mother said on the stand. And then she just yelled out, she said, "God help me," and then bluntly and graphically described in detail everything that happened in that house. So she was like the main nail in the coffin for why they got convicted of murder. So Gertrude was found guilty of murder in the first degree and was charged life in prison without parole. Paula got charged murder in the second degree, but they appealed it and they took her back to court. She took a plea for voluntary manslaughter and took 3 years and was paroled. John, Hobbs, and Coy, they were charged with voluntary manslaughter and got 18 months in juvie each. After release, Hobbs started chain smoking, and not just like chain smoking, but severely chain smoking, that at 18 years old, by 20, he had decayed his lungs, and by 21, he was dead of lung cancer. That's how much he smoked after he got out of juvie, because he was so distraught by the whole situation, I guess. Now, he was the one who was possibly in a relationship with Gertrude, which is a whole nother thing. He could have been a victim in and of himself because of the fact that he was 15. But he didn't do well after juvie. But Gertrude actually appealed her case, and they took her back to trial. And instead of life in prison, they gave her 18 years to life. She was a model prisoner. She was like a den mother to the other prisoners in the prison. So when she came up for parole, the community picketed by saying like, this person needs to stay in jail. Like, she was terrible, she was awful, and that she should stay behind bars. But despite, they granted her parole, and she walked out of prison December of 1985.
I'm pissed.
Yeah, I know. Like, this story was at least gonna make you feel pissed.
I told you I'd probably feel angry.
Yeah.
I'm angry.
She changed her name to Nadine Van Fossen. She moved to Iowa.
Looks her up. She's probably dead.
Moved to Iowa and died of lung cancer.
Oh, there we go.
1990.
1990.
June of 1990.
Dang. At least she was not breathing the same air we were when we were alive.
Thank the
Or
Lord.
while we're alive.
Most of the fates of the kids were unknown, but most of them probably assumed new identities after that whole scenario. It's rumored that Paula is in Iowa and still alive under a false name. Stephanie became a school teacher under a new name. And John Jr., he became John Blake and became a truck driver. Then he became a real estate agent. He got married. He had 3 kids and remained pretty much anonymous until the Jonesboro massacre, where he came out in the media that his sentence probably should have been stronger or like harsher for his part in the murder.
Wow.
The case was called the single worst crime perpetuated against an individual in Indiana's history. And that's the story of the murder of Sylvia Likens.
Yeah, that was a heavy one. I'm sorry you had to do that one. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to make you proud.
I'm very... You delivered. I'm proud of you. I know I did know about this one, but like I said, I didn't know like the details. It's not that I'm not like cold-hearted or nothing. Like, yeah, it's awful. Like, it's really awful. But like I told you earlier, if I saw it or like like if I watch the movie, I could probably watch the movie, but it'll bother me. Like, I'll be very uncomfortable.
Right.
But hearing about it, I'm like, oh, it's just a story you're telling me, like. But
you try to like take it away from reality, even though it really happened.
Most of the things I hear, if I didn't see it, it didn't happen. Like, that's my
right.
mentality.
It's something. I mean, in this day and age, it's the only way that you can get through things.
Yeah.
Like, that's a trauma response, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, I got a lot of that.
I was like shocked at every turn. Like, I know that I shouldn't have been shocked so much because like this lady was fucking crazy, but every time I like wrote another thing down that happened to Sylvia, I was like, oh my gosh. I just mouth open, like I couldn't. Oh my gosh, it was crazy.
I know, and anytime you would like, I could tell when something heavy was coming up because you'd be like, like you would like prepare. I'm like, oh, well, here comes something. And
I'm truly, I know I shouldn't be, but even though like I'm a true crime person, like it still shocks me, like things that people do to other people, like things humans do to other humans.
Honestly, yeah.
And so like when I have to like read about it or like, you know, like I'm like you, I think that if I like was just listening to it on like a TV show or like a Dateline, like I can occupy my other parts of my mind with other things that it's like that's not going to faze me. But when I have to do the research and I have to know all of the ins and outs of everything, it's a different story.
I'll give you guys a little insight. So when she asked me what I wanted, I did tell her, yes, I do want something more heavy. But I also told her, I was like, I don't know how to describe what I like. I like something with skeletons or like remains found. And then I was like, I like cold cases. Like Cold Case is like one of my favorite shows right now. The actual show called Cold Case. It was
The
like
drama?
yeah.
Oh, okay. So the one that's not
Yeah,
real.
it's not real. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I love that show. When they're
You mean
solved.
like a case that
That
was
was
cold
yeah.
for so long and then
Yes.
got solved.
Yes.
Oh.
And then they usually have like skeletal remains that they find. I don't know why.
Okay, I have a story for you then.
Cool.
Cool. All right. Well, if you guys have any scary stories for Campfire, please send them to us on Instagram or Facebook in our DMs at Saturdays Are for the Ghouls. Follow us on Twitter for the Ghouls and TikTok Saturdays Are for the Ghouls. And Spooky Babes, we appreciate you very much. Go watch something that makes you laugh after listening to this podcast.
Go watch a Disney movie. Go watch
yes,
The Office.
The Friends.
Friends. Family Guy.
Bob's Burgers. And I hope that you all are doing well with everything considered in the world right now. And
take care of yourself, guys.
And we will see you
in your nightmares.